Alright, welcome to the first episode of the Paint Booth. I'm Carson. Some of you might know me from my other podcast, the Jankety Ass Podcast, which is it's a different lane of entertainment. This channel is going to be more hobby-based, which is uh, one of my hobbies, I guess you could say. But so primarily, what one of my main hobbies is, I mentioned this in the podcast as well, the game Warhammer 40k, and also, not only just playing it, but also what I like about this hobby is it gives you the chance to express your own creativity. And the game is played with models that you build from kits, and you get to paint them up in, whatever colors you want. In some cases, there's some iconic heraldry that some of the models use. Hey, if you notice me looking over, it's because my computer's it's over here, so I gotta look over and make sure that I'm in the correctly centered and everything like that, which will be a little bit easier once I get to the actual models. Now, I do want to stress that for the most part, this podcast, this channel is for entertainment purposes. So, while I will be showing, different techniques that I use, I don't necessarily consider myself, a pro painter. Although, if I get paid for doing this channel, then, technically I would be a pro painter. But, like I said, it's just about entertainment. And, yeah, maybe you'll learn something out of it too. And for me, it's mostly just fun. So, for this first episode, we are going to be working on the Imperial Knight Titan. Now, the first thing that you'll notice is that, for the most part, it's already finished. However, as you can see, the legs and the base have yet to be painted up. And the reason that I went ahead and included the body and the arms of this model is to show off the paint scheme that I'm going to be using, because I have a few other knights that I basically use in the same army, and they belong to a household. In my case, I use a Mechanicus household, which you could also choose an Imperial household, but I like Mechanicus better. And also, whenever the knights were first released in the previous edition of the game, they were primarily a Mechanicus unit. And only later on did they become their own faction with their own household rules and such as that. So, the main thing about this color scheme is so this knight, which is the Knight Errant, which means that it is specifically equipped with the thermal melta-cannon, which you can kind of here. Maybe this will give you a better view. Just a gigantic melta-cannon, and then on the other side, the Reaper Chainsword, which is basically just a gigantic sword. And now, to get a better idea of how big these things are in the game, this is one of my Chaos Space Marines, which is meant to be slightly bigger than an average human. So, you can kind of see how big these things are. And also by the fact that the cockpit can be seen at the top of the chassis. Now, this knight, the color scheme is slightly reversed. I will show you one of my other completed knights. It's got a little bit of dust on it, but the first knight that I painted was the Knight Paladin. This was done with the original Knight Titan model kit. Now, the main things that I want to point out is the basic heraldry for the house that I painted up is this dark gray, and then the whatchamacallit, some of the more, like the armor and the trim and the exoskeleton parts. Here, you see. Here we go. More of the skeletal parts are this this brass color, and then also using a standard gunmetal is the term that they use in their paints. Yeah, basically just a regular metal color, and then also this standout brass color, or not brass, but it's like a reddish bronze, are the main colors. For this one, the Knight Errant, I decided that for the main part of the body, I was going to also have it be the same brass color, and have the gray be more along the outside, which is what we're also going to do with the legs here. So, for the gray color, what I use is standard Mechanicus gray as the base color. Let me get that. There we go. So I'm still figuring out the positioning and making sure that it doesn't get too lit up. And then over that, we're going to use the Nuln Oil Wash. Blech. It's a bit of a tongue twister. So to start off with, I'm going to be working on the toes and the leg plates. So the shin plates, the middle of the knees, and then the thigh plates are going to be gray. With some of my other knights, I had also painted the crotch piece gray, but I'm going to be painting it the brass color to really keep in line with, the theme. Let me get some stuff out of the way here. So I will get my brush wet. And it looks like I'm going to be needing some new paint soon, which hopefully will be easy with the lockdown. So I'll go ahead and paint up the knee here to kind of show you what this color is supposed to look like. Now, so it looks like my paint is having a little bit of problems, but you can probably see right here, I went ahead and painted up this knee section right here, and that's the base gray that I'm going to be using. And now I am going to go ahead and quickly get all these sections done up for you and washed. So that is almost the base layer for this thing done. I can already see there's a couple spots I still have to hit. I also forgot to mention that I went ahead and did up the middle banner in the same color. as the banner is the heraldry of the model. Let's see. Yeah. Also got to get these little side pieces here. And I'm also trying to do this in a way where you all can see what I'm doing. With a big model like this, it's going to be a little bit harder since it kind of blocks sight to itself, really. And is, since I have such a small field of view with my webcam here, well, it takes up a lot of the view space. But whenever I'm working on some of the smaller models, it should be a bit easier to see what's going on. Okay. For both you and me, hopefully. Okay. So, that's toes, leg plates, mid banner, and vents on the side of the butt box, I guess. The gears. Alright, so next, I'm going to give this thing a little bit more texture. And that is where the washes come in. So what these do is you put them over a surface area. The more detail, the better. And basically, what happens is this kind of paints. It's more they used to be called inks, but now they're what are they called? Shades now. So the idea is that these paints, since they're more what's the term? I want to say viscous. They tend to collect into deeper recessed areas. So in this case, whenever I put them on the plates, they're going to sit along the edges of the surfaces that sit along the inside of the trim, and as well as some of the creases, and then the small little bolts are going to stand out slightly. Well, the recesses are going to stand out. One of the later phases, which is the dry brushing, that's going to make some of the details like raised ridges and like the bolts and stuff, that'll make that stand out. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and apply the wash. So now we got our shade on the gray parts of this model. Now, unless I'm working on a surface that has a lot of very fine details, like, a face or something like that, I just like to put my washes on nice and thick, because, well, the idea of using washes and techniques like dry brushing and even highlighting, which I don't normally do, but the whole idea is to just get as much contrast into the model as possible and really break up the chromatic profile of whichever surface. So, yeah, as you can see, it darkens up the gray and fills in some of the spaces around that have more detail, so like the edges of the trim and around the bolts and stuff, and into little cracks and crevices. And it pulls away from flatter surfaces. Not as much as some other things, but now fortunately with the Knight there aren't a lot of huge flat surfaces like the side of a tank or something like that, but even so you do still want to be kind of careful to spread out your brush strokes a little bit, otherwise it could blotch up kind of like it does with the banner here, and then you end up with some weird stuff going on. But once I go back in and, start dry brushing a lighter gray, it will serve to hide some of those blemishes. And, well, for now, I'm going to go ahead and let this dry, and when we come back, I'll apply the dry brushing, and then we can start working on the trim and the skeleton. Alright, back into it. So we let the wash dry on the gray sections. I let it dry overnight, but for you it's only going to be a few seconds. Also, you may have noticed by now that part of the reason that I started this is to play around with a little bit of time lapse. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and dry brush the gray areas using the Dawnstone gray, which is a lighter gray than we use for the base coat. And in order to do that, we use a different kind of brush, which is a flatter head and is dedicated for dry brushing because the process is actually pretty rough on your brushes, as you will see, since I got to get most of the wetness out of the brush, and then really just get it on there. And you got to be rough with the paint and the surface, and it takes a few coats, or not coats, but it takes a few extra passes since the paint isn't completely wet on your brush. And you can't see it that well, but it does help, especially on these bigger areas. It helps to wash out or drown out some of the blemishes and the little bits of pooling that were left by the wash. I think might be able to see this side's been dry brushed here, and a little bit into the crevice here, which is the like the joint between the two armor plates on the shin guard. And let's just go ahead and keep going with that. And I'm not sure if you can see that well, but see, it works especially well. Let me. There we go. It works especially well in areas with more detail, so like the vents here along the leg, for example, and some of the bolts. And there's that armor joint. And it's a little blurry. Let me see. Yeah. Whatever. I promise it's real. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and do up all these bits real quick and get back to you in a second. Dry brushing done on this model, or well, not on this model, but on the gray areas. Alright, let's get this out of the way, and I'll be switching back to my regular brush here in a moment. Now, you might be able to see the effects a little bit better on the hard edges of the toes here. That's where dry brushing really stands out and makes these edges pop, assuming that you're using a lighter color, as you should be, for dry brushing. Next, we are going to get into the trim and the exoskeleton part, or the I guess the scaffolding. No, that's not the word. The body, the workings. And to do that, we are going to use, and I just realized there is a part that I missed. So, I'm going to go back in and do that real quick like. So if you're watching, the part that I'm talking about is there's a plate over the hydraulics on the back of the legs here. That's this big guy right here. That is also supposed to be gray. And you know that happens while you're doing models. You almost always miss something at some point. So it's a good idea to, whenever you're hobbying, to just go back over your work and double check. Fortunately, I caught this now rather than later. So, go ahead and paint these up real quick. So, I got that done for now. And I'll worry about, getting some of the finer details on the spots later. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and start in on the brass color. Choosing, or bronze actually. We're using the Sycorax bronze. And I'm going to start with the crotch plate here, just to kind of give you show you what that looks like. But then I'll also be moving on to, like I said, the main body of the legs, some of the bigger pieces, and also the trim on the shin and thigh plates, whereas the trim on the knee pads is going to be a different color, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But first, I'm going to go ahead and do up this piece. Now, one of the things that you might be able to notice right away is that this color, being one of the more of the metallic ranges of Citadel paints, it goes on pretty thin. So it is going to require a few more coats, or more than just one coat, which is pretty normal with most colors. And it's also pretty normal to it's usually better to go a bit thinner while you're working, because it's easier to add on rather than remove paint, as I'm sure anyone could tell you. Okay. So this should give you a little bit of an idea of what that's going to look like. Now, obviously, like I said, it goes on pretty thin, so you can still see a lot of the black primer underneath. But with another coat, that'll solidify this color up, and it'll really start to stick out. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and do up the rest of this model. Do up the rest of the parts of this model that are going to be using Sycorax bronze. So, as you can see, I went ahead and did up the main body of the leg, the trim of both the shin plate and the thigh plate, and then also the trim along the bottom of each of the toes here, as well as, like I showed you before, the crotch plate, except for this bottom piece, and then the top rim of the waist. Now, even with time lapse, that's a lot. It's a lot of area to cover. Not to mention having to do the other leg, and then having to go over everything again. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish up with here, I'll go ahead and show it to you, the Sycorax bronze. I'm gonna go ahead and finish that up off camera, and when we get back, we'll get into the next bit of details. So, this is gearing up to be a little bit longer than I thought it would be, but we are finally done with the brass color on the legs and the middle portion of the body. So now we're going to move on to some of the less aesthetic metallic parts, and that's going to be some of the bits here on the toes, the joints for the legs, and the main gears and panels here in the gears and the hydraulics here in between the legs and in the back. And to do that, we are using the Leadbelcher color, which is really just a standard, just humdrum, grayish metal color. So to give you an idea what that looks like, I'm going to go ahead and start with one of these side joints here. And now this color I like because it's pretty much an all-purpose color. No matter what paints, nearly every paint scheme that I do, no matter what faction or group or just whatever, I almost always end up using this color somewhere in there. Okay, and another thing that's nice about this color is it's a little bit thicker, so you don't need to use a bunch of coats to put it on. So, there you go. That's basically what Leadbelcher looks like. So, let's go ahead and do the rest of the parts with this color. that part's done. And now we're moving on to the last of our metallic colors. So it's a new pot too. Screaming Bell. It is more of a reddish color, and even with the colors that I have going on here, it's going to really stand out. And where we're going to use that is on more like the trim on the knees here, for example. Some of the bolts in the joints, and wire and hose trim, and just stuff like that. So without further ado, this has already been taking a while, so just going to get right into it. And I'm going to give you a quick little example of what this color looks like. Here you go. I don't know if you can see from here. I need a new camera, I think. There's a little reddish dot there. But, yeah, like I said, it really stands out in contrast with the other colors that I have going on here as far as the metal sections are concerned. And now whenever I put I'm eventually going to wash these metal colors with another color, obviously. But it'll take away some of the reflectiveness and the shine of the metallic colors, but it'll give them a more worn out and in-depth, contrasty look as well. Okay, we're here again. As you can see, obviously this time we're in HD. I don't know if you guys listen to my podcast, but that would be the Jankety Ass Podcast. But I finally managed to get some new software. Sorry, I'm just readjusting my mic here. I finally got some new recording software, so now you can actually see what I'm doing, and it's not just some blurry ass picture. Also, now this is only going to seem like it's only going to be a few seconds to you, but I actually haven't touched this in a couple weeks because, well, I just been focusing on some other things, and I'm not in a rush. Also, my back's been just really killing me. Sorry, I almost sneezed there. But I figured before I get started, I might as well give you another look at what I've already done. So until now, we've done the gray, whatchamacallit, the heraldry basically, is the gray color. And then, we've gone through the process of, putting the base color down, putting in the wash, and the bringing out the edges with dry brushing, as you may be able to kind of see from the toes. You can see on the edges here, we got that nice lighter gray color over the darker gray, whereas it's more of a really dark gray / black color in the recesses, as you can see on the edge of the toes down here next to the metal parts, which is the next part that we did, was the getting into the metal and the trims. So as you can see, the primary framework of the leg is in this bronze color, and some of the less important metal panels and aspects, like the gearbox back here, for example, and some of the panels on top of the toes, they're more of a just like a gray metal, basic metal color. And then I use this reddish brass for the trim, and that was where I left off last time. So now what we're gonna do to really make this stand out and give us some character is, over these metal parts, I'm gonna go ahead and apply Agrax Earthshade, which in the Warhammer community is also known as liquid talent, which you're gonna see right now. So basically, what this is, it's brown, essentially, and so what that's gonna do is it's gonna give all of this metal, all these metallic colors, it's gonna dull it out a bit and give it a really worn out look, kind of a weathered, worn out look. And then of course it's gonna fill the recesses with this brown color. And then also on top of that, on this reddish brass, it's not going to change the color that much. It is going to dull a little bit, but where it's going to have the greatest effects are going to be on the bronze coloring that's on the legs. So you're going to see a lot of the brown in the recesses in different spots. Well, you'll see in a bit. And then it's going to have the greatest effect on the gray metal, or the silver-ish metal. It's not really silver because it's not bright, but anyways. So go ahead and relax, and we're going to go ahead and I will get started on this, and we'll get through it. Alright, that is it for the shading of the metallics. So what we're going to do is we're going to let that dry, and then we'll come back. And fortunately, there's not a lot of there's not a whole lot left on this. The base is going to be a completely different video, if I even do a video for that, but I probably will because I'm going to go ahead and build it up with some other stuff. But anyways, there you have it. Alright guys, well, you probably won't notice this, but I've been on a little bit of a hiatus from this, but we're just about done. We're just about done with this guy's legs, and we are really down to the brass tacks and knickknacks with this guy. So what we're going to be doing now is I'm going to start taking care of the piping along the legs here. So you'll see that's these two big pipes that go from the hips to just under the thighs. And then we got a couple more on the back of the legs. And then also these big joints down here. Yes, so that. And then also some of these other cables that you kind of see. There's a few, again, in the back of the legs and down here in between the legs that you can kind of see under the hydraulics. And then a couple more kind of in the main gearbox right here. And then last, I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of trim on this banner. And, well, actually not last. There's going to be some more after that. But also another development since I've been here, I started using, I switched paint brands, so to a couple different ones. I'm using Vallejo, which is a company out of Italy, and Army Painter, which is also from, I think, the UK, Denmark, Europe, basically. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the pipes. And so that's going to be two things. First I'm going to be painting them with field gray, which more or less matches the middle gray that I normally use. So I usually have 3 different shades of gray, and this is kind of the middle one. So this is going to make up the base color of the pipes. And then I'm going to, after that, I'm going to be using Nuln oil to fill in the recesses and really kind of flesh it out. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and paint this in just to show you what that looks like. Let's see. Yeah. Let's see, we get a nice darkish, kind of olivey gray. Wonder. Let's go ahead and fill in this pipe for you guys real quick, but not too quick, so don't want to get sloppy. Another thing you may have noticed is when I was doing the outside kind of base colors, I didn't really worry about painting within the lines because, you know, with the first few colors, anything that spills over, you're just going to paint over later anyway, so it's not really a big deal. But once I get into the details like this, then I obviously want to be more careful so as to not screw up the stuff that I've already worked on. Because the last thing anybody wants is to constantly go over. I got a lot of dust on this guy. Shit. That's another problem I've always had is just dust and hair getting on my models. But I got like a mini keyboard vacuum coming in to help take care of that. Okay. So you can kind of see there's a nice little gray there. I'll probably give it another coat because this I might not have shaken it up well enough. It's a little viscous, but it'll do for now. I can always give it another coat later. And also, I'm going to let it dry a little bit before I get into applying the black wash onto the pipes. And while I'm doing that, I'll work on one of the other details that I mentioned as well. So sorry if you can't really see what I'm doing that well. It's a little... This guy's really big. Or this piece is kind of big and ungainly. Also, this is... I think I mentioned before, I didn't actually build this knight. Normally, I would not have the base attached before I started painting, but... you know. That's just the way it came. I managed to get this guy out of the used bin when I was at the Las Vegas Open. It was only $100, which is good 2/3 of what it normally retails at. So normally one of these knights is about $150 for the kit. So I would say I lucked out. And it was the errant variant, which was just happened to be exactly what I was looking for at the time. Alright, so we got a little bit done there. And just so I don't have even more dead air while I'm doing this. Alright, again, you probably can't see this that well, but it might be, it wasn't the first hiatus I've taken. Actually, if you listen to my my other podcast, Jankety Ass Podcast, go check it out on YouTube and iTunes. I was suffering from some back problems, which, aside from being in a lot of pain, also meant that I couldn't sit down or sit upright for more than, well, at the worst, at all. I couldn't sit at all. The only position I could really do was lay down. That lasted for the better part of a week. But fortunately, I'm out of that now, and I'm able to pursue this again. And then also, as I'm sure you'll figure it out later, I don't work on these in order. I kind of just do them as they come, and I was actually working on some other videos that are going to be coming later. So I was doing a commission for one of my a guy who's part of the local leagues, which have unfortunately been suspended, due to everything being locked down. Which in a way was kind of nice because, I had time to work, basically. Even with all my, all the stuff going on with my back. He didn't mind because it's not like there was anywhere to go. or any tournaments coming up, which there are actually some major ones coming up, but I wouldn't be surprised if they get canceled within the next couple months, which, again, still unfortunate, but yeah, that's just the way it goes. I'm actually still waiting to see if the LVO for 2021 still ends up going down. Since, I mean, Vegas is open, and that is still, a good half a year away, so maybe things will be better by then, but I don't know. It's not looking good. That's the point. And, well, not to get into some political bullshit, but, or medical, really. Hey, you know what, fuck it, I won't get into it. Anyways, as you can see, I'm now working on the last sections that are going to be using this gray color. And that is the waist joints. Or, I'm sorry, not the waist joint, but the where the legs connect to the waists. Or just the one waist, I should say. And again, as I mentioned before, I got to be a little bit careful here since we already, did some work on the metal parts here. Or the connectors around the piping. Alright, so that is one side. And the other side. I do have to admit one thing about this paint scheme is it does get kind of tedious, especially with the smaller AdMech models. As you'll see later, I got one planned for later. But I mean, that's what happens when you get models with a decent amount of details, so it's a labor of love, which I happen to love Warhammer, so of course I want to make all this shit look good. As I would hope some of y'all would too. Alright, we're almost there. Just about a little bit left. Okay. So that more or less covered all the surfaces. I'll give it a better look in a second. So, as I mentioned, we got those the joints here in between the legs. The legs done, and then these bigger pipes in the back, as well as behind the thighs here. There are some parts that are going to need another coat, so we're going to let that sit for a second, and I'm going to move on. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the trim down here on the banner really quick, and I'm gonna use this is another Vallejo color, terracotta, if I could talk right. And this one is going to be. This one is a substitute for. I used to use corn red a lot from the Citadel range, but again, switching things up. I was stuck on pretty good. Alright, so. But yeah, man, part of this commission that I was doing had specific paints that he wanted me to use because he was trying to match some other models that were already finished, and it was pretty much all Vallejo colors and, dropper bottles in general. And I mean, once I started using them, it was pretty much, there's no going back. So, especially after I had tried to start setting up to get back to work on this project, and a lot of the paints that I had were, either clumpy or mostly dried up. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to make the full switch to dropper bottle paints. And I did end up having to go with a mix of Vallejo and Armutainer just because of what was available. But fortunately, a lot of the colors, you can find good substitutes. And since they are using, I'm pretty sure they use the global Pantone scale. So, despite whatever company you're using, you should be able to find a good match for just about everything. And this color is very, it's looking like it's very similar to the Citadel red I was using before. I think especially once it dries up, it should be more, it'll get darker. It does look a little bit orangey right now, and it kind of matches up with the that nice bronze color that I used on the trim of the knee pads, as you can kind of see here. But yeah, like I said, once this dries up, it'll get darker, and I'm actually gonna go ahead and put some wash on this banner trim as well. Alright, so just a little bit left here. So I want to make sure I get all the spots, including the edges. And there's a little frill on the back of the bottom as well. And I'm just gonna leave like the back of the banner just black, because what one decision that's almost as important as deciding what to paint is deciding what not to paint. So I personally, I usually end up going with like primarily darker themes in my paint schemes, as you can kind of see. And, dark spaces that you don't go over, those kind of help to take your eye away from those spaces and allow the other spaces that normally wouldn't stick out to really pop out. But yeah, so that's kind of what that red looks like. And I'm actually going to add a little bit more down here at the bottom just to make sure that there isn't too much showing through. Also, one thing that I notice a lot with if you're using a black as the undercoat is in some cases it'll actually reduce the amount of color that you need to add in, because the black doesn't really show through, whereas if you were using a white primer base, you would have to contend with white spots showing through, which looks like shit. We don't want that. Alright. So that is the banner trim finished, or just about. Let's see, where is no? Okay. Let's see next. Yeah, I'm actually liking the look of the pipes, so I don't. Actually, yeah. I'm gonna go back in with my field gray here, because there are some spots on the leg joints that look like they could use just a little bit more. So that's what we're gonna do, especially here on the back. So we're just gonna thicken it up just a little bit. And then that way it doesn't completely drown out and go to shit whenever I put the black wash over top of this stuff. And from what I can tell, it looks like this is another one of those colors that, it looks different wet than when it's dry. This one has like a much more, there's like a little bit of green or olive that shows through whenever you first apply this wet. But yeah, once it dries up, it's a nice medium gray, or a neutral gray, which is what we're going for. Oh yeah, this part of the joint definitely needed an extra coat. And yeah, this pipe could use a little bit more as well. Yeah, and then also going back to deciding what to paint and what to leave. Just black with some primer. That especially applies to portions of the model that you can't really see. So like especially you might see with some later models that I do in later videos. You get a lot of models where they're holding like a weapon or a gun or whatever across their chest, and you really don't have to worry that much about what's underneath. So to actually spend the time to get in there and paint is, well, it can be kind of hair pulling. And since I am not trying to win any awards doing this, it's a waste of stress and time. Okay. So once again, we're going to let all that dry. And in the meantime, we'll start getting into the cables. So, what I've been doing with this paint scheme is I have bright red and bright blue cables. And to do that, we're going to be using two colors. I have pure red from Army Painter. That's going to make my bright reds. And electric blue from Vallejo. That's going to be the light blues. So, since I've already done a little bit of red here, I'll go ahead and start with the pure red. And this one we do not need much at all. It's really only going to be a handful of spots. So what I do is I try and do half and half, like half of my cables are red and half blue. And fortunately there aren't a lot on this model, so I'll just start with the red. So here's one cable. I need a little bit more of that. There's only two cables on the gear box. The gearbox. Okay. So you can kind of see once this gets into focus. There we go. There's like a red cable spot back there. Actually, you know what? Instead of showing you that, I'm just gonna first I'm gonna get a little bit more. And this was actually a little too wet, so blot that out a bit. There we go. That's a nice, legitimate clump of paint. Then also with these cables is they're just going to be like a flat color. We really don't need to add any washes or anything like that. Although, looks like I'm going to be needing a little bit more. So I'm finding with this army painter paint, it goes on a little bit wet, which is okay. Because if it was too dry and you applied it too liberally, you'd run the risk of getting paint where you don't want it to, or depending on the case, you'd run the risk of washing out some details that you wanted to preserve. Okay. Let's get some red in here. And a little bit underneath there. Okay. So I'm going to need to put another coat on this, but you can see that's more or less the color that we're going to make half of these cables. And then just to keep a little bit of symmetry, on the other side I will also be doing the cable that runs underneath the leg here. Like so. There. Right underneath the pelvis. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and give those a second as well. And now we're going to get into our blues. Still got to make sure these things are shook up quite well. Let's get a little bit of our electric blue. That came out pretty fast. But again, it's fine since you don't have bottles or anything like that sitting open. Alright, so I'll go ahead and start with this one back here. And as you can start to see, this one gives us a really nice shade of blue that really pops out. And it looks like I was right about these different brands, because this Vallejo stuff is not as wet. So looks like one coat is gonna solve this. Shit, I really wish that they didn't glue the base onto this thing. But that's just a challenge. So yeah, you see that it's really nice shade of blue in there, and it really contrasts with the red on the other cables. Let's go ahead and keep going with that. So we got the other cable under here, under the groin. That's the word that I've been looking for. Under the groin. That's also going to be blue. It's a cool color name too, electric blue. Which actually in this case is pretty fitting. I guess. I don't know. And last but not least, we have this small one that's in the back of the waist on the gearbox. So we definitely want to be light-handed while doing that one. Just double check. Alright. So the blues are done. And now I just have to go one more time with the red. Especially on this one back here. Oh yeah, there we go. That second coat's really bringing the color out nice. And again, apologies if it's kind of difficult to see what I'm doing. But well, that's just the way it is. A lot of the other models that I have are smaller, or at least not as clunky. Yeah, they're smaller, straight up. So it'll be easier for you guys to see what I'm doing. Of course, that'll also mean that I'm doing, with a lot of these videos, I'll be doing multiple models of the same. So like, especially if I'm doing something that's kind of more of a horde infantry type of thing, I'll probably be doing like 4 or 5 at the same time. Because why not, you know? Alright. Yeah. I should do it with the cables. And that should do it with the solid colors as well. So now we just have the washes. We're going to go ahead and go back into our pipes back here, and I'm going to fill them in with our old buddy Null Oil again, which is the black wash. So we'll go ahead and start on these cables down here. Get a nice coating of this stuff just to fill in all the ridges. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. So it's these cables on the back of the shins. Like so. And just a little bit under the cables. Alright. And then under here for these behind the groin pipes. Just the front side, I don't have to worry about being too meticulous. I just want to get enough on so that there's, you know, some kind of visible effect, but the back of these pipes, I got to make sure that I get more better coverage. That's not proper syntax. More better. Just better coverage. Or more coverage. And then last but not least is the actual groin joints, which aren't as detailed, but there's bigger ridges, so there's more space for this wash to fill in and do its thing. You want to make sure we get a decent amount in there just so that it evenly fills in all the recesses on the spot and doesn't look, blotchy. So, almost there. All right. So as you can see, on the groin joints, we got more detail in the ridges. You can really see the accordion shape that they're trying to go for. And the same as with the pipes behind the legs, whenever they, let me get it closer, whenever that gets into focus, eventually, maybe, there we go. Yes, you can see more detail in the back there. All right. And then last, but not least, for now anyway, we are going to fill in or go over the trim on the banner with our other buddy, Agrax Earthshade, our old friend, which is the brown shade. And as you will see once again, it's often called liquid talent. So we'll just put some of that over the, first the frills in the back, and then the frills in the front. And then just for good measure, just to keep things even, I'm also going to be going over the, also want to go over the flat edges, or not edges, the flatter surfaces of the trim in the front of the banner. And it's also not that big of a deal if you kind of go over the lines because, or only just a little bit, I should say. You obviously don't want to completely like half cover an area that you don't want to, but if you just get a little bit over once it dries, it's not really a big effect. And so yeah, a little bit of a character on the crotch banner. All right, so this guy is almost done. There are just a few small details. All right, so we're really down to the very last thing with these night legs. So we've already got the heraldry colors in the gray, and then of course the metallic colors and the inner workings, which is represented by the brass and the bronze and all that, and then some of the other small details. So now all we really need to do is get something on this banner here. So in order to do that, we're going to use this color that I got, Dragon White, or just any way really. It's all interchangeable. And now, as I mentioned before, I do already have the top portion of this guy done. And what I want to do with the banner is I have this design here that, well, the Forge world that these guys follow, that like kind of the backstory for this what you call it, Knight household, and my Adeptus Mechanicus Forge world is that they essentially worship trigonometry. So everything, you'll see all the symbols are triangular based, and in this case, the idea is that they also denote some sort of rank. So that's what I have going on here on the shoulder pad, and so basically I'm just gonna port that down here to the banner. And to do that, we'll start with our white. Okay, that's a nice solid color there. And just go ahead and get right into it. I'm going to try and make as straight a line as I can while freehanding. Fortunately, this isn't a too complex of a design, so I don't really have to outline anything. If I was trying to do like I do see people sometimes will do like full-on detailed frescoes on the plates of their knights, and that is something that's a little beyond me. And it's also a pain in the ass, so it's not, I ain't doing it at all. Okay. So there we have the basic symbol that matches the knight, or the shoulder pad. And then there's also, I also put in like some fake binary code, just to give it some more life. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same here and attempt to match, again, what's on the shoulder. So basically just some random ones and zeros, although actually in this case it's not going to be random since I am copying myself, but the original was random. And as you can imagine, the zeros are a little bit more of a pain in the ass than the ones. But as long as it looks decent, that is what matters. So my goal is always to do some sort of, I go for tabletop ready. Well, I call it tabletop plus because really in a standard tournament, tabletop ready just means that you're meeting the 3-color minimum. Whereas I like to do full colors, but I won't go into like crazy things like edging and airbrushing or trying to do effects like OSL or anything like that. So that's it. That's all we need. I will show you. Let's put that away. Here is the finished Knight Errant. Oh yeah. Big sexy boy. He's got his legs. Top's already done. And I will eventually do the base of this guy in a different video. But for now, that's the first episode of the paint booth. And well, in this obviously, a little bit of inside Hollywood magic. I don't do all of these in order, especially since, you'll see in some of the later videos that I've also been working on a commission, which obviously, I have to do that right away or within a timely fashion. And you've also seen that, I've gone through some changes with my camera, got a better camera on this guy, or not a better camera, but better recording software, capture software. And let's see what else. I also got this nice new, oh wow, that's bright white. But I got a ceramic paint palette. It's a little bit easier to clean and all that. So yeah, everything's doing good. Hopefully this will be the start of something great. And so yeah, there's gonna be more videos or more episodes coming out ideally weekly at the earliest. And yeah, if you want to see, so go ahead and like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. If you want to see more of me, go ahead and check out my other YouTube channel, or uh, any podcast channels like iTunes, Pandora, Spotify, yada yada yada. Jankety Ass Podcast is my podcast. It's not about Warhammer. It's just about whatever else. And of course, go ahead and find us or find my page on Instagram too at jankety.ass.podcast. And like some posts, leave me a DM, tell me what you think. If it's good, I'll probably read it out on the I'll read it out on the podcast. Or if it's bad, either way, thank you for watching.